channel. I am once again on the floor because I thought actually it was a nice casual setting for these videos, particularly the ones where I'm talking about stuff that's A, quite personal and quite sensitive, and B, that's just less fun. If you're wondering why I'm in a woolly hat and a big jacket inside, it's because it is quite cold and I've just walked in, and the heating will be going on pretty soon. But it's not why I'm here. I wanted to, in today's video, go into a bit more detail about how I got to where I was in terms of developing a eating disorder. I'll try not to go into too much detail, and fair warning, there could be comments in here that are triggers for you, that for you or for anyone that might be in recovery or suffering or just genuinely don't want to hear stuff like this. So if that is you, I suggest you tune out now. And there goes the entire viewership of this video, all two of you, one of them being me. Anyway, please just be mindful that I will be covering things that are quite sensitive and that may resonate with you and that may cause not distress but pause for thought. So please just be aware of that. I will do my very best to kind of rein in what I am saying. But in the same breath, I want to be as honest and transparent as I can, because as I mentioned in the first video, if you haven't watched it, please go and do. I'm going to try and point up here to indicate that there is a link to that first video. If there is, fantastic, I've got it working. If there isn't, this is going to be quite embarrassing because I'm not going to edit this video. That's my one thing that I've promised myself I'm not going to do, and I'm still pointing up there. I'm not going to try and do is edit these videos where there's, or do loads of editing. If I completely lose my words or there are moments of silence or someone barges in, I will edit. But I want this to be as natural and as conversational as possible. So, as I mentioned in the first video, and this will give background about this video and the title, which is part one of my experience with a eating disorder, and this is going to go into kind of the start of the behaviours, the mindset, the lifestyle that I was living for probably 5 or 6 years, and really my take on exactly how that progressed and evolved or devolved into having a mental health illness. But yes, if you haven't watched that video, please go back and do so. This one, I am going to go into a bit more detail to exactly the journey leading up to it. And then there'll be another 2, maybe 3 videos, kind of, the start and probably the time I was in hospital to the bit I was in recovery and kind of now. So maybe 3 more videos. But I will stop rambling on and let's get into it. So, where did it all start? So, if you haven't watched the previous video, I opened up and explained that I suffered from a eating disorder. And if you don't know who I am, go back and watch that. But for a quick recap, I'm 30 years old. In my early 20s, I suffered from a eating disorder, anorexia, and that kind of wiped out the first 3 to 4 years of my life in my early 20s, or greatly disrupted my life. The first, well, pretty much from the age of 20, 21 to 24. So how did I get to that point? Because for a lot of people there is a history of it. For others, it can just creep up on you and you don't have any warning signs. Still, for others, there is some behavioural tendencies there that could, if not checked and kind of observed closely enough, can develop into obsessive compulsive tendencies, which are unhealthy. I was probably on it kind of crept up / had those tendencies. There was no history of it in my family as far as I was concerned. In terms of my nuclear family. So I was an extremely sporty kid, and a lot of this might resonate with people, particularly men, as well as women. I was extremely sporty. I was very good at sport. Football, cricket, rugby, anything I really applied myself to, I was really good because I was fairly athletic. But even before that, in my early teens, I was quite a chubby child. I was still good at sport, but I was quite chubby. And, that kind of like hindered my popularity and my success as, a kid and a friend. I didn't have the best social life. I had some friends, but really my life kicked off when I lost weight. And I lost weight because I went on the Atkins as a 12, 13-year-old kid. And I lost a lot of weight, a serious amount of weight. And that kind of escalated things, really, because people started to notice, even at 12 and 13, that I dropped a significant amount of weight. And I became even better at sport. My endurance went through the roof, my aerobic capacity went through the roof. And people started to notice me on the football field, but also in school. People commenting, girls started to fancy me, my kind of friendship network increased, my popularity in school increased, because not only was I like academically pretty good, but obviously my sporting achievements and my sporting ability went up. And when you're of that age, really your sporting ability is the one of, if not the most important factor in you being popular, in you being noticed. And that kind of allowed me to open up myself and my personality. So that kind of grew and that compounded, and there was a snowball effect where I just grew in confidence. I started dating someone. I had my first girlfriend. I was really good I was getting even better at sport. It's been noticed by professional football clubs, and my grades were really good at school. I was getting really popular, and kind of that took me through and that took me up to the age of 17, 18 when I went to sixth form. And kind of it got to the point there where, in terms of eating, I would eat anything I wanted. Food wasn't a concern for me back then. Even though I was on Atkins, once I was eating carbohydrates again, something flipped. I clicked too early then. Something clicked in my mind where I began to just not think about food. At that age, I don't think you do. It might be different now, but I didn't. I was just enjoying my life. I was enjoying sport, enjoying school, enjoying my friends, enjoying life, eating and drinking pretty much whatever I wanted, because I was that active that nothing was a problem for me in terms of weight and looking and being really lean and almost having a six-pack. So fast forwarded to the ages of 17, 18, and things kind of changed. You get to that age where actually girls, sex and being attracted to someone else becomes kind of even more important. Your hormones are nearly developed, and you enter that phase of your life. And in sixth form, it was even more competitive. I moved to a completely different school where actually I wasn't, one of the most popular. I was the new kid. I knew literally no one. I had to make friends from day one. And, you know, I was still really sporty. I could still pretty much eat and drink sorry, I had some food earlier, and I think something's stuck in my tooth, but that's just rank. No one wants to know that. You know, I could still pretty much eat and drink what I want, and I don't think I was fairly obsessed with food, but what I was obsessed with exercise. I started to develop this notion that, you know, in order to be popular, in order to be successful, in order to get girls, as in be noticed by really good looking women, because I was vain and I still am vain to a certain degree. I had to look a particular way. I had to still be really lean, but I also had to be really muscular. So I started to hit the gym, and I started to use weights. I started to try and focus on more muscle development, but I still had this thing in my mind of, well, I need to still be a certain size. I still need to have a certain waist size, you know, a waist 30 or a waist 28. And kind of that mindset or that pressure to exercise, and that all or nothing mindset began to kick into gear, because things shifted for me. I then focused pretty much all of my effort and my time on my exams, on my A levels to get into uni. I did really well. I got 3 A's and a B. I was really pleased with that, but I nearly worked myself into the ground to get there. And I think that the academic side is where I really did develop the all or nothing mindset. That kind of black and white success or failure, which is it's either an A or it's nothing. That was it. You know, if I wasn't getting top grades, I was a failure. And that carried me through into my first couple of years at uni, where, again, food still wasn't an issue, but the exercise was. I still wanted to exercise as much as I could. The pressure on myself to be perfect, not perfect in the way of I can do no wrong in life in general, but when it came to my studies, my academic performance at university, that was everything to me. You know, I needed to get a first. I needed to get over 80% in everything that I did. If not into the 90s, in everything that I did, in every essay, in every bit of work. And, you know, I shunned pretty much all of the social activities in my first, probably not in the first 6 months of the first year, maybe not even the first year, but definitely in the second year. I barely went out, focused on my exams. My nutrition was just crap. I'd be eating entire bags of raisins. I know, really weird. You know, I'd still be drinking. And really, I kind of always wanted to, it was that sense of frustration that I couldn't look like other people that I saw in the gym that started to develop that frustration that no matter how hard I worked in the gym, I could never grow big muscles like that. And that was fundamentally down to a lack of knowledge, a lack of education, because I knew I had to eat. Or now I know you have to eat in a calorie surplus in order to build muscle. And I just wasn't prepared to do that, because my mindset was, like a lot of people, I think, is skinny equals better, leaner equals healthier. You aren't attractive if you don't have a toned stomach, i.e. you have, for females, it's the line down the center of the stomach. If you don't have a thigh gap, for men, it's if you don't have a six pack, or you don't have obvious obliques. There are loads of aesthetic markers that I looked in the mirror and was like, well, I don't look like that. I had the stereotypical skinny fat type of body. And that to me was a constant source of frustration. But, you know, I still powered on. I powered through the first year and the second year. Again, you know, I didn't have any, you know, and because I was so consumed by my studies and by exercise, again, I didn't go out. I barely socialised. And really things kind of kicked in, or things started to spiral out of control in my third year. You know, and that might seem like a ramble, but I've tried to truncate as much of the first 3-4 years, you know, between, you know, my early teens through to the age of 20. Because really, whilst the behaviours were kind of set in stone, the underlying behaviours of constantly exercising, that all or nothing mindset, really the actual concerning behaviours didn't kick into gear until the third year. Behaviours that I didn't even think existed until it was pointed out to me. So, you know, third year was the most important year for me. I was going into my last year of uni and I desperately wanted that first. And I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do with my life at that point, post third year. So between September and Christmas, I worked really hard and I was getting really good grades. I think I was on course for my first class honours, which is, no matter how I got there, I just wanted to get it. It was a status thing, but it was also a recognition of how hard I worked. So literally, nothing was going to get in my way. And why is this important? Because if I refer back to that all or nothing mindset, this is where it really started for me, or this is how it began. This is the birthplace of that black and white success or failure mindset. And come hell or high water, I would sacrifice everything and anything to get that first. You know, to get what I think I really deserved, that I'd worked hard for. So, you know, September to Christmas, things started to spiral out of control because I wasn't eating that much. I was, you know, my nutrition, the quality of my nutrition started to go the wrong way. I wasn't making healthy food choices. I was cutting out things like carbohydrates, mainly cutting out most fat in my diet. I was living off, and again, this is probably where I'm going to start getting into triggers, so I will put a warning in the description and at the start of the video again. But I was living off like Pepsi Max because I really started to worry about my appearance, and it's really hard to describe and explain it, because in the same breath I wasn't worried about how I looked, but then again I really was. I'd still be going to the gym for 4, 5, 6 times a week, and I would walk 1 to 2 miles to the gym. And if you've ever been to Sheffield, I always think you're either walking up a hill or down a hill. Going there, it was down. Coming back, it was almost exclusively uphill. And I would work out for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then walk back and be absolutely drained, but I wouldn't eat properly. I was probably consuming 1,000, 1,200 calories by that point, and I was 20, nearly, if not 21, and I was consistently losing weight, but I wasn't consuming nutrient-dense foods, so minerals and vitamins were not getting into me, and I was living off Pepsi Max to keep myself feeling full, to bloat out my stomach, and drinking a bucket load of coffee, again, to make me feel full. And it wasn't until my 21st birthday, which was in the October, that I remember people saying to me, you look anemic, because I was nutritionally deficient, because I was expending so much energy on and worrying. And this is another factor, the pressure that I was putting myself under, the stress was then ticking over into my studies. It was then ticking over into how I was, into my food and my exercise. And that's an important point, because that kind of triggered things, that triggered the wrong things. So I come back from my birthday with people saying to me, you need to go and see a GP. But, I did go and see a GP. I came back, and what really turned it for me was I started to get quite worried about my dissertation. I was getting all flustered. I was getting really confused and really stressed out, to the point where I was having like panic attacks and just overwhelming anxiety, because I didn't think I could get through it. I didn't think I could do it. And I could look at a piece of paper for four hours and just go, I don't know what to put down. And I remember having conversations with my tutor at the time, and he was just like, I'm really concerned because you've not submitted anything. You're missing lectures, you're missing seminars. What is going on? And really what was happening was I was emotionally, as well as physically, overwhelmed. I couldn't cope. I effectively had a breakdown, and I was hiding away in my room, probably going to the gym and going for really long walks. But fundamentally, I was hiding, because I couldn't, because now I think about it, everything else outside that room was just scary. I could control my life inside that little room, a room smaller than this. But I remember one day literally just breaking down in tears, crying my eyes out. And I was 21 at this point. This was just before Christmas. Breaking down. I mean, sobbing at my desk. Just uncontrollably, because I could not. And what triggered it was actually something that I still today can't. In fact, I can rationalise it, because a very famous Welsh football player called Gary Speed committed suicide. And I can't remember if this was around that time, but just for some reason in my head, I have connected the two. I remember hearing that on the radio, or around the time, or remembering it then. And like I say, just breaking down. And then, because I started to just wonder, how can I get through this? There is a man who, to the world, to his friends, had everything. But inside he was struggling, and he felt like he couldn't cope and he couldn't go on. And just for whatever reason, that just sent me over the edge when I started to think about, how can I get through the rest of my uni year? How can I write this dissertation? It's the most important thing I'm going to have to do in my life up to this point. And I can't even think of a title, a question, an essay, a topic. I can't even do that, when by that point I should have written or submitted the first quarter of it. So there's me breaking down inside my room. And, I then I had more GP appointments, more doctor's appointments. Finally went to see a specialist consultant or GP, someone who had qualifications in mental health illnesses. And I did the eating disorder questionnaire. Unsurprisingly, it came out as though it came out indicating that I had a eating disorder and that I was suffering from. I don't know if it recognised this or diagnosed this at this point, but whether it also recognised and diagnosed that I had depression. But again, I went back to my room and broke down in tears again, because the sheer relief, but also the sheer what the fuck, I've got an eating disorder, kind of dawned on me. And I remember going away to Ireland for New Year's to see my family. And at this point, I really am. I've lost a lot of weight. I'm probably 8-9 stone, probably around that. And I've lost a lot of weight. So I go to Ireland at Christmas. So it was Baltic, absolutely Baltic. It's right on the coast, this small fishing village. And I say to myself, I'm going to go for a run, right? And my aunt lives at the top of a hill, and it is a really steep hill. And then it flattens off for miles. So I run down the hill. I probably get a quarter of a mile and just think, I can't do this. I can't do this. My legs couldn't do it. I couldn't run. And I came back just thinking to myself, what is wrong with me? I can't even go for a run. Because I wasn't eating enough. I wasn't feeding my body the nutrients and the energy and the fuel that it needed. My muscles couldn't, it was the first time my body couldn't do what I wanted it to do. And I remember, again, fast forwarding, sitting in a car park with another family member, just speaking to her and saying, I really need help. I really do need help. And at that point, I decided that when I'm going to go back to uni, I'm going to ask for a leave of absence. So I went back in January, and that's exactly what I did. And I didn't go back for 2 years, which will be another video entirely. But I asked for that leave of absence, which is granted. I go to the university GP again to get checked over. And at this point, I think my dad came with me. And we are in the GP's room. And, my dad's saying, I want him to come back to home. I want him to come back with me today. They take tests, scans of my heart, a ECG, and the GP just said, no, we can't risk, in Matt's current condition, we can't risk putting him in an ambulance or allowing you to travel with him in your car 200 miles south, because if he has a cardiac arrest or if there's a problem along the way, we can't help him. We don't think that Matt is in the condition to travel that far. So what happens is I was hospitalised that day, literally driven to the University of Sheffield Hospital, or Sheffield General, whatever it's called. Driven there, put into a bed, and to this day, and it will always stick in my mind because it just demonstrated how much energy my heart was trying to conserve. was there was a woman in her 80s who I think was dying, and there's me, 21, in a bed opposite. My resting heart rate was like 30 or 29. It was something preposterously and just staggeringly low. Might have been slightly more than that. I can't remember the exact figure, but it certainly wasn't much more than that. It was frighteningly slow and dangerously slow. That's why I went into hospital. But this woman in her 80s had a higher resting heart rate than I did. Her heart was beating faster. And that was it. I was then in hospital for, I was in that specific hospital, I think for 6-8 weeks. I can't really remember. It felt like a long time. And that will be another video to tell you kind of like my experience inside the hospital. But just to talk a bit more about the behaviours and kind of where I noticed things going wrong, it was really my emotional state. It wasn't my weight. I was still massively concerned with the way that I looked, because I'll be open and honest, I wanted people to fancy me. I wanted to be attractive. I wanted to be popular. But I also wanted to be really good at my studies. I wanted to be, and I knew that I was incredibly smart. Like I was intelligent, and I am intelligent. My grades were telling me that. I was book smart. But it was my ability to cope that was just wiped out from me, because I really couldn't. I had such severe anxiety attacks, panic attacks, the stress and the pressure of surviving and doing well, of doing everything that I knew I was capable of doing, of achieving the grades that I knew I could achieve, of making my family proud, of making me proud of myself. All of that pressure to be perfect, to not fail, not show weakness, just exploded. It was like a volcano. It just erupted. But I had that voice in the back of my head, which got stronger and stronger as I stayed in hospital. In the back of my mind, it was, look at, go for a run, go for a walk, go and exercise, don't eat. Because fundamentally, and this is often the case with very high achievers, is and I will come onto my mindset in general now, but with high achievers, it's if you find that what you care about most and what you value most isn't working, or if something in your life is starting to spiral out of control, what can you turn to that you can control? And that for me was food and exercise. When my studies, when I felt like I couldn't cope with my work, when I couldn't cope with my dissertation, when emotionally I was too overwhelmed, I focused on what I knew I was good at, and that was counting calories, losing weight, and exercising loads. And that's where the obsessive compulsive behaviour started. It was really it was in my third year, when I was 20, turning 21, September to December, when everything flipped. Disordered eating and exercise habits became worrying, obsessive compulsive behaviours that sent me down the path of anorexia and depression. And at that point I was depressed. At that point I was I was an absolute wreck. I didn't want to leave the flat. Sorry, the house. I didn't want to leave my room. Housemates would knock on my door to see if I was okay and to see if I was there, and I just wouldn't answer. I just wanted to stay in bed all day. I'd curl up against the radiator just to, just to make my world even smaller and less overwhelming. And that's kind of the part one. That is part one of the story of where I was, and I think actually a lot of people can relate to that, particularly those who have suffered or experienced or known anyone who has had an eating disorder or anorexia. It is something that you can control. Anorexia, otherwise known as ANA, or eating disorders in general, are a crutch. They're a false support network. They lull you into a false sense of security because they provide you with what you think you need at that point and what you think you don't have, which is control, which is stability, which is success. And it constantly tells you, or it actually does tell you that you can keep doing what you are doing because you're doing it really well. You have lost weight. You've cut your calories even more. You ran further. You did an extra workout. You fasted for even longer. You've not had carbs again for the 4th day in a row. And what seem successes are actually shovels digging a deeper hole, because it's not helping you. Those behaviours that you think are allowing you to stay on your feet and not topple over are the complete opposite. They are behaviours that are just digging you further down into that rabbit hole. So, and that wasn't something that triggered in my mind until many, many years later. I mean, 4 or 5 years later. And that's it. I don't want to ramble on for much longer because I will go into a second video about my time in hospital. But I'm just trying to think if there's anything else, any other behaviours. I wasn't one of those, or I didn't not eat. And I think that's a common misconception with eating disorders, specifically anorexia, and it's starvation. As in, you don't eat a single thing, you fast. That isn't always the case. It's severe restriction of food. It's depriving yourself of food, of correct nutrients, your macronutrients, your micronutrients, and your vitamins, proper fluid balance. It's not zero consumption of food and drink. And and again, trigger warning, I just cut out certain foods. I wouldn't eat peanut butter, I wouldn't eat fat, I wouldn't eat cheese, I wouldn't eat carbs. I would pretty much only eat protein. I would barely drink alcohol. I would not eat sweets, like mince, anything like that. I would like like I mentioned, help myself feel full by filling up on liquids. And that was all to cope with stress elsewhere. But I'm not for 1 minute going to say that wasn't my really crap attempt at getting a six pack and being lean and being muscular. But at that point, it just spiraled out of control. I still thought I was fat, and that's another important thing. I genuinely thought at that point I was fat. What I saw in the mirror was not what other people saw. I thought that I needed to get leaner and smaller and stronger, but how could I when I wasn't eating enough? When I didn't have a balanced nutritional diet, when I wasn't giving myself enough rest, enough sleep, when I wasn't giving myself a break, when I wasn't giving myself permission to tell myself it's okay to not be perfect every single day. It is okay if you have a day off. It is okay if you don't have a six pack, if you don't look like someone on the front of Men's Health magazine. And that, again, wasn't something that I learned until probably the last few years, actually. And I'm 30 now, so that is a long time to learn a single lesson. But yeah, there you have it. That is a very truncated description of part one of my journey. And by the way, I haven't scripted this. This is me talking off the bat because I want it to be as honest and as open and as real and authentic as I can possibly make it. And to me, that is literally, I haven't even given myself an agenda with these videos because I'm not going to. If you do have any questions, depending on what questions they are, I will happily answer them. But yeah, that is it. Solemn 40 odd minutes over. I will break these up. I'm not gonna, like I said, this isn't gonna be the content for the entire channel. It definitely won't. It will be far more joyful and uplifting and upbeat because I am that way. But I do want to share my experience. And I will get into the details more or I will touch on kind of the specifics of a male having an eating disorder as opposed to a female having a eating disorder, because there are important differences as well as many similarities, which I'll touch on in part 2 of my time in hospital, because that was an experience. So anyway, please like, subscribe and comment, or if you're supposed to say it another way, because it really does help. I want to keep doing these videos and I want to know that people are watching and that in some really small way people are finding them useful or them insightful in the right way. And yeah, until the next video, have a fab day and a fab week.